Jarrett Stidham and Ben Powersby on the way out, and of course the trade that kept David Montgomery from coming to Denver, and my thoughts even further on the tight end situation, particularly where it pertains to Kenyon Sadiq. But maybe he's not the only tight end in the draft we should be going after. It's your man A and J, and we're back with some more Broncos talk, and we're gonna actually start with that very subject because I kind of have been pounding the table for the last couple of days, especially since seeing that combine performance from Kenyon Sadiq. I just have a tough time believing that if there's an actual opportunity for the Broncos to move up and actually pick him up, say anywhere between 10 and 15, I think they should do it. Hell, I even had a mock draft where I traded up with the New Orleans Saints to pick number 8, and that's how I got him. But the reality is that, of course, it would require not only this year's first round pick, but probably even next year's and who knows what else in addition to that. In the mock that I did, it was a first from this and next year, along with next year's second. And maybe that's not necessarily the move to be making, but if nothing else, it certainly would be worth it in the long run. But it doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all to our tight end situation, especially given the fact that you got guys like David Njoku and, of course, Dallas Goedert, and maybe even Isaiah Likely perhaps becoming available. I mean, it really just depends on those respective situations. But I'd like to think, again, if the opportunity is there, Denver should definitely take it. Does it mean that it actually happens that way? Absolutely not. And I'm not going to be entirely mad if it doesn't. But in that same vein, I think about, again, just focusing on the draft per se. Is that the only opportunity for a tight end out there? Absolutely not. There's a guy by the name of Eli Stowers who, honestly, I feel like is going to be every bit as good. Actually had probably the closest numbers as far as performance, whether it be the 40 or the vertical jump, to what Kenyon Sadiq as you could possibly get. And I wouldn't be mad at that. He's certainly got the size of a true tight end as it is, to where a lot of people feel Sadiq is a little undersized. I'm not really sure how much that matters, especially when we had a guy like Shannon Sharp once upon a time. And he's not necessarily the biggest guy at tight end either. But in that same vein, it's not as if it would have been a bad move. And I still think it ought to be a good move should that opportunity come along. But then again, maybe Sadiq actually does fall a bit to where we can make a safer trade, say to 20 perhaps, and get him there. But I guess only time will tell where that's concerned, and we'll just have to wait and see in about a month and some change from now. But with that being the case, we definitely got to talk about the trade that basically kept the Denver Broncos from getting David Montgomery in the orange and blue. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm actually fine with that. I don't really feel as if there's a scenario where we need a David Montgomery. He is a little bit closer to 30 than a lot of the available running backs out there, namely, as I've talked about before, and I know I've talked ad nauseum about Tyler Algier, but then of course there's also Breece Hall, and of course Kenneth Walker, who honestly, as far as Walker and ETN are concerned, ETN supposedly linked to Kansas City. They could have him for, as far as I'm concerned. And then, of course, Kenneth Walker seems likely to be going to the New York Giants. I'm also fine with that as well. I mean, not that either are bad players. It's just I don't know if I see them as the ideal fit for the Denver Broncos the way that I believe Tyler Algier is. It just doesn't really appeal to me the same way, and I'm not really sure why, and that's absolutely the case when it comes to David Montgomery. And the Texans got him for Juice Scruggs, their offensive lineman, and of course a fourth and a seventh round pick for 2026. And to be perfectly honest with you, there's no way in hell that David Montgomery's worth all that. I just don't see where that's the case, and I'm glad that George Payton was only willing to go so far as doing what it ended up taking to win that bidding war. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think that anything outside of a fourth or even fifth round pick would have been a bit much, and to that end, I really would be pounding the table to bring back J.K. Dobbins at that point. Hell, I'd probably still even be looking at signing Tyler Algier if I'm the Broncos, but then again, I guess we'll never know on that one. For me, I like David Montgomery. I think he's been a fantastic piece for the Detroit Lions, and he may actually serve the Texans pretty well, even though he's 29. And of course, we don't know what the Texans' backfield is going to wind up looking like. But all that being said, I just don't see a scenario where trading for him would have been as beneficial as a lot of people would have been inclined to believe. And maybe I'm just mistaken on that. Maybe that's where I'm also mistaken when it comes to ETN, Walker, and I've even talked about this before when it comes to the candidates that the Broncos talked to at the Combine in Jadarian Price, Emmett Johnson, and Jonah Coleman. And to me, I'm not really all that high on any of them. Again, if I had to make my choice, I'll say it again, it's got to be Jonah Coleman. But even with that being the case, I'm not really sure that I'm all that high on him. I've been saying before I like Kaytron Allen better, and now I'm liking Robert Henry Jr. a little bit better, but who knows if either of those guys will end up being on the table. I would say if they do pick up Tyler Algier and even take a flyer on bringing back JK somehow, I don't think the Broncos go running back in the draft. In fact, even with just one of those guys coming back, I would absolutely think that the likelihood of the Broncos going running back at that point probably not as strong, especially when you want to focus on, say, again, tight end or even linebacker for that matter. Maybe even wide receiver if the Broncos don't land one in free agency or even via trade. But all that being said, that's just my stance on that. I don't think that we're really missing out with Montgomery going to the Texans, and we're just going to be the better for it, I think, and that's really where I stand on that. But of course, we got to talk about a situation that could see Jarrett Stidham and or Ben Powers on their way out of Denver, and I certainly hope that isn't going to be the case. I feel like bringing them back is probably the more ideal move. I find it really interesting because Philip Lindsay on 104.3 Denver Sports Radio has actually talked about bringing in Anthony Richardson, as he's actually requested a trade. And to me, I kind of see that idea being a decent one. I don't know if it's necessarily the move the Broncos should be making, but what I will say about it is that I don't know necessarily what happened in the AFC title game is reason to move away from a Jarrett Stidham. I mean, really there were a combination of things that went wrong in that game, and honestly that even goes back to the week before where we lost Bo Nix, but really it just didn't work out for the sake of it just not working out. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm actually glad that it worked out that way, because it was better off the Patriots getting their ass whooped by the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, and now they got to deal with the Super Bowl hangover, and I'm here for that. But realistically and in all seriousness at the same time, I feel like both Powers and Stidham bring an awful lot of continuity, a lot of cohesiveness to the Broncos offense, and I'm hoping that they do stick around. When it comes to Powers, I feel like an extension or a restructuring of his contract is really all that would be necessary at this point. And when it comes to Jarrett Stidham, I mean, I see nothing wrong with him at all. I feel like, other than that last interception he threw to Christian Gonzalez, I don't see where there's anything wrong with him at all. I feel like if you play that situation back 9 times out of 10, each and every single 9 of those times, Jarrett will get it done. And hopefully it doesn't come down to that, but if it does, I'm willing to believe in him, especially given the fact that he's going to remember what happened in said AFC title game, and I feel like a different outcome will certainly actually be in in favor of the Broncos at that point. But only time will tell. Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. Hopefully Bo Nix comes back strong and as healthy as ever, and we'll certainly look forward to seeing what he'll be like in 2026. But let me know what y'all think down below. I mean, yeah, just let me know what y'all think about any of the things that I talked about here. Y'all know what it is. Like, share, and subscribe so y'all can help me out with that algorithm, and definitely hit that notification bell so that you know when more vids are coming through. And with that being said, this has been your time with A&J, and I appreciate you spending it with me.